to answer your questions. So without further ado, I will go ahead and introduce our fabulous speakers for tonight, Daniel Williams and Katie Charles. Daniel is a career educator with over a decade of experience as a college counselor, creative writing instructor, and adjunct English professor, guiding students around the world through successful applications to universities in the US, UK, EU, Canada, and Hong Kong. As a former college writing instructor, he specializes in helping students generate creative application essays that underscore their unique abilities and highlight their genuine interests. And Katie Charles is another one of our fabulous lead counselors. And prior to her 11 years here at GE College Prep, Katie worked in college admissions and athletics at multiple colleges around the country, including Dartmouth and the University of Georgia. She also coached at the collegiate level, ranging from Division III to Division I schools, and continues to help students with college counseling and the athletic recruitment process. So I will go ahead and hand it off to you, Daniel and Katie.
All right. Thanks very much, Lorraine, and welcome everyone to our presentation tonight. So as mentioned, yes, today we'll be discussing the path to undergraduate business programs. So what are business programs looking for in applicants? What are the different kinds of business programs that are out there? What does the application process entail? And what can you be doing now while you are preparing in order to put together the strongest profile possible to increase your chances of admission? So Katie and I are going to have kind of a conversation, bouncing ideas back and forth with each other. But as Lorraine said, if you have any questions or want something clarified, or if something isn't mentioned during today's presentation, please pop it into the Q&A function, and we'll get around to it at the end of the presentation. Okay, so first things first, right? What are the types of undergraduate business programs? So there's a BBA, right? There's a BSB, and there are various other things that we'll discuss. The first is the difference between the kinds of degrees, right? So a BBA is a broader, human-focused, career-ready angle to the business degree. So it's looking at things like management and leadership and things like marketing, human resources, business ethics, entrepreneurship, practical decision making, and leadership skills. Whereas the BSB, right, it's the Bachelor of Science in Business, is much more quantitative and analytical in its focus. So that might be things where technical training is included in the degree, things like forecasting, regression analysis, use of certain types of software. And that might be more on the side of statistics, finance, operations, marketing, and strategy. So depending on what it is that you want to do with the degree after, right, you might be more suited to one of these choices than another, right? If you want a broader kind of general investigation into business ideas, then the BBA is a great option. If you know that you want to go into something quant related like finance, or if you know that you want to do data analysis or statistics or regression analysis for businesses, then the BSB might be a better option. So different programs offer different kinds. You can poke around and see what's available, but it's a good idea early on to figure out which one you're more suited to and which one you're going to apply to, so you can start to angle your profile early on towards one way or the other. Then we've also got business major versus school of business. What's that about, Katie? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So what we often hear is, oh, I'm applying to business school. Majority of the very largest universities, the business school is a subsection of the university and it is its own entity. And so oftentimes when you're applying, and we're going to talk a little bit about some examples here in a few minutes, you would be applying directly into that portion of the school. So you would enter college knowing what your major is going to be and going directly into the business school. But for a wide variety of colleges throughout the country, they don't necessarily have a separate school for our students to enter. You would be going in majoring in business, and oftentimes they have a pretty broad range of those. So you can declare it long before you get to college without having to concern yourself with the secondary application process or the additional requirements that some business majors will have if you're applying directly into the School of Business at a college or university.
Cool. And we've also got some specializations, right? So even within these particular degrees, right, there are specializations that you can focus on, right? Some of them are finance or marketing, accounting, entrepreneurship, international business, business analytics, information systems. So again, if we're talking about trying to make your profile as competitive as possible, reverse engineer and get clear as soon as you can about what angle or what brand your profile is going to have so that you can then start to add on experiences, classes, summer programs, internships that point in the direction of that intended major. So if you're
And
looking for a little secret, right? Oh, go ahead, Katie. What were you going to say?
But a big piece of this is knowing what it means to choose one of these as well. I have a lot of students come in, they're like, you know what? I think I want to major in marketing. I'm like, well, do you know what that entails? That's interpersonal communications. That could be graphic design. You have to have a pretty good understanding of what the subsect of business you're looking for is going to be about. And this is, I will say, Pali has some phenomenal business curriculum within your high school. It's really a good idea to start checking out some of the classes you could potentially take there as a foray into the beginning of this, because you'll be able to do it with kind of a low lift in terms of amount of time. Signing up for there is a marketing and sports and entertainment marketing class. You guys have business enterprise. Take advantage of what you already have so you have a better idea of what direction you want to go. And additionally, it looks good on your resume already to have some of those classes under your belt, particularly if your school offers a pretty broad range of them. And you guys are lucky enough to have a school that does.
Yeah, and they're going to ask you, right, in essays on your application, why do you want to study this particular field? So you need to have reasons for choosing that, whether it's things that you've learned in the classroom before or experiences that you've had. And I would also say, as Katie suggested, look at the actual requirements for the majors. So if you go online, you can see what would be required for a finance specialization or an accounting specialization. A lot of people want to do finance because it sounds cool, right? People make a lot of money. Go and look at the kind of math classes that are required for something like that. And if you're not a math intensive person, you might want to rethink that and angle your profile to something else. So get ahead of things. Basically, the idea here is figure out maybe what you're interested in, start to poke around and research those things, see what's required of you in order to be able to get a degree from that, and then build the profile backwards, right? So it's like you know that you're going to be applying as an entrepreneurship major or specialization within the BBA, then you better be doing stuff during high school to either start your own business or join forces with another team that's starting something new, right? So reverse engineer your profile accordingly. Admission requirements. Yes, what are these, Katie? Talk to us about these.
So no matter whether you're applying directly into the business school or into a school and hoping to get into business, and we'll talk a little bit about how that works next, you still need to meet all the different academic requirements and admissions. You're still filling out the application. You'll need to have a good GPA, a good level of rigor. For most students, you still want to consider taking the SATs and ACTs. A lot of students in the last couple of years have skipped this step, and it has certainly had an impact on admissions rates for students who do not have the test scores versus those that do, particularly at our highest level universities. So if you're aiming for those top 25, you're going to really want to have a set of SAT or ACT scores. And for most of those schools, they have been test optional up to this point, and most of them are putting back in test required over the next couple of years if they haven't already. And so, just something to think about if you are hoping to go this direction and you are looking at some of those top institutions, you really do want to make sure you're considering taking an SAT or an ACT before, well, long before senior year, hopefully, sometime during junior year at least, so that you can start to get an idea and prepare for it so you can put the best potential portfolio together for them. You're still going to need that letters of recommendation. And if you have the ability to take some of your business classes and you do well in it at a high level, it's worth asking potentially a teacher from the business program to write your letter of recommendation. The more relevance that the skill set that you have for the recommender is to the major that you're considering, and that's information you're going to give your recommender before writing, the easier it's going to be for them to talk about your strengths, particularly in the field you're considering. Personal statement and your supplemental essays. The personal statement, you're going to want to make sure that, and we will actually dive into this a little bit more as we go through this, but you're going to want to make sure that we're tailoring those essays to show that you are prepared with things like leadership, that if you have experience in the field that you're trying to get into, that it makes it into there. And the supplemental essays invariably for quite a few schools are, why are you choosing this major? Or why our school? And so you need to be doing your homework on specific examples of why you want to choose that. And that comes with all the homework we just asked you to do, learning more about your potential major, taking a look at what classes you might be taking and what skills you either already have or need to work on in order to prepare yourself.
Totally. And in terms of academic rigor, right, regardless of whether you do the BBA or the BSB, right, they're going to be looking at your math, right? So if possible, you want to be finishing up with at least AP Calc by the time you graduate. If you can get beyond that, that's even better, right? But they're going to be looking at your math. Same thing with the SAT or the ACT. There'll be a focus on your math scores there as well. So yeah, just ensure that you are pushing yourself as much as possible without damaging your GPA. If you look at the CDS reports from the top schools, they'll show that the GPA and the scores you get in your classes are just as important as the difficulty of the classes that you take. So if you take all the easy classes and get A's, that's not good enough. If you take all the difficult classes and get B's, right, also not good enough. So finding the perfect balance, right, between those two to keep your GPA high and demonstrate academic rigor. The business school and the engineering schools, I would say, are quantitative in terms of the way that they evaluate applicants. So just keep that in mind.
And the other thing I will recommend from what he just said is also consider taking a statistics class. When it comes to a math class that's going to have a strong correlation. Eventually, you're going to have to take linear algebra. We pretty much all do because that's where the math goes for economics and business. But knowing that if you take statistics and or calculus, you're going to have the foundational math that they're going to be looking for.
Totally. And yeah, statistics is broadly applicable, really useful for any of the specializations that we discussed, right? Helping make sense of large amounts of data, drawing conclusions from that data, and then giving recommendations or changing a business's operations based off of that data. What are we looking at here, Katie? What is this? Tell us.
So one of the things that we talk a lot about with students is invariably students come to us and say, I want to major in business. And my next question is always, why? Because oftentimes students, if they don't 100% know what they want to do, they pick business. It seems like the most applicable. It seems like a major that will get them a job after graduation, which makes sense entirely. But when we talk to students, understand that business programs across the board tend to be more difficult to get into than a lot of other fields within a school. So when you're trying to apply to a business school, and we have two examples sitting here right now, Cornell, traditionally incredibly low admission rate, right? And their Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, which is their business school, is the lowest of any school on their campus at 4.94%. Whereas you
Ouch.
have yeah, that is tough. That is MIT Stanford number. Okay. And so when we're taking a look at these things, we need to know that like business shouldn't be a catch-all. You should have a direct reason because oftentimes you're going to need to be up against some of the best students in the country if you're applying into business schools. Okay. There is both the highest number of applicants are generally going towards business and you're going to therefore get the probably the highest number of good students, right? The numbers tell us the more that are in there, the more likely the students are pretty good at what they're doing. And on the right, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, great school, Big Ten, well known for their academics. But if you look at that, even on their campus, business is the lowest admit of any of their schools. Okay, they're in agriculture. So if you're really excited about agriculture, that one might be worth it at 56.7%, right? But when you're talking about your admissions rate to colleges, you need to both know the general admission rate for the school and what your schools of your specific major is admitting. Because you might be surprised to find out that business is generally pretty hard to get into. It's not quite the catch-all that it used to be.
Yeah. And that's why you have to be 100% sure that there's nothing else that you would also want to study, right? Because you're going up against difficult numbers, and it's going to be a highly quantitative review because of just the number of applicants. So let's say that maybe your grades aren't that great. Let's say maybe your GPA and test scores are not that brilliant, but you've done a lot outside the classroom in terms of, I don't know, volunteering or getting involved in the community, or maybe you're an artist or something like that, right? You're under the review for the business school, right? It's going to be really, really tough because sure, there'll be some questions and supplemental essays that can talk about who you are and how you see the world, but it's going to be also angled towards business. So these programs might be really good for students who are very quantitatively impressive, right? They've got great SAT or ACT scores. They do really well in school, and then maybe fewer extracurriculars, but the ones that they do really are directly applicable to a business degree. So anyway, just some things to consider, right? We want to give you as much information as possible, but yeah, right? Generally understand it's the engineering and the business schools at most universities that are the most competitive to get into. Okay, specialized admission requirements. So in addition to the basic stuff that Katie spoke about, your personal statement and your essays and the transcripts and the SAT and the ACT score, for some schools where you're applying directly to the business program, they'll have specialized admission requirements. Katie was telling me that earlier that this is changing all the time and that Michigan is also changing the way they do things. Do you want to talk about that?
So sure, Michigan Ross School of Business used to be what we would call a pre-business program, where you would apply in, you'd spend 2 years doing your core curriculum, and then you would apply again to get directly into Ross for your final 2 years. They are now a direct admit university, which means you need to know going in as a freshman that that's where you want to be, and you will be applying directly to their business school. That's changed maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And now they also changed their portfolio requirements, which we love Ross. They try to change these questions up almost annually. So you'll have something fun and exciting every year to take a look at. But knowing that not only are you applying, you're applying directly to Michigan Ross School of Business, which means if you don't get into Ross, you're not getting into the University of Michigan. There's no like, oh, there's a secondary option or you can apply into another school. That's a relatively new thing for Michigan. And now, if you're applying to Ross, that's what you're applying to, and there is no secondary option. They used to allow you to have a secondary major that you could apply into, and that is no longer the case. And so it's obviously highly competitive to get into Ross School of Business, and you now don't necessarily get into Michigan. So if that's your top choice school, you have to really think about whether you want to go into the business school to start, or whether you'd prefer to try your luck going through LSA, which is their letters and arts.
Yeah, basically College of Arts and Sciences, where the acceptance rates are going to be much more generous, right? So what's more important to you, to do the business thing or to get into the school? That might be something that you're weighing. And then also as you're looking at your timeline, right? This is extra stuff that you've got to do on top of all the Common App requirements. So are you willing to put in the time and energy to do it? Sure, right? If this is what you want to do, then absolutely. And check out what they're looking for here.
This is a
So,
pretty heavy lift for this one too. The portfolio for this is you've got to be really, really good because that's what they're receiving. So as we go through this, think about it. You're looking at very top end work, and this is several hour intensive per item.
yeah. So they want you to basically write some kind of response, either an essay or short answer about, right, a business case. So you basically will come up and analyze a real world business situation or problem to demonstrate an understanding of business concepts and come up with some sort of solution to that. And of course, you should be using the subject-specific terminology that you've learned from business courses in order to be able to explain this. So it's not just like, yeah, I would do this, this, and this. It's using the specific language of a businessman or businesswoman in order to explain how you would break this down step by step. So this is going to make or break your application, right? Because of course, why would they have the extra requirement if it's not something that is going to be really carefully looked at by admissions committee? So you can look at these from other students that have submitted online to get a sense of like what people have done previously. But again, this is not something you want to be trying to come up with at the last minute before you apply. So knowing that this is going to be on your plate is helpful. So you can start to look around your community and look around, um, where you live and see if you can identify, a real world situation or problem that a business could solve. Then there's also a personal impact essay, which talks about how you made an impact in your school, community, or organization. So, of course, leadership is a huge aspect of business. They want to see someone who's out and about and making connections and making change, right? That the world has changed. There's a before and after that can be pointed to you being in the world. Then there's also a resume or activities summary, right? So skills that are relevant to business, teamwork, problem solving, and then also previously a optional multimedia or creative submission. So if you have like a pitch deck that you worked on, or if you worked at a finance company over the summer and put together like an investment plan, or if you evaluated a proposal or something like that, you can also submit those as part of your application.
And Michigan has used this in a variety of different ways in the past, including they have you like create a flyer for a program. So there's a whole lot of things that you can do. You can also submit work. So if you're in an organization on campus that has a business background, you can oftentimes also submit work that you've done for them. So you can, similar to some of the essay options, you can submit work that you have done previously. So anything that you've worked on would be something to make sure we keep a copy of in case you potentially need it for this, for your applications down the road. They are one that does it. They're not the only ones that do, but it is worth knowing that there are some multimedia options, and they are going to ask you to submit that in a portfolio style, and then you'll have to follow the directions for putting together a portfolio for the school.
Mhm. Other specialized admission requirements. NYU Stern has a Y Stern essay. Babson also focuses heavily on entrepreneurship. It's the #1 school for entrepreneurs. They ask for examples of innovation or projects that you've worked on, which you need to demonstrate in essays and also in interviews. USC Marshall may have also short answer essays about leadership, career goals, and then the global management program at Haas, where you go and spend a semester at different locations across the world, right? One specialized essays about international business and why you want to study abroad and what you would take away from having done so. So yeah, just to keep that in mind, right? In addition to the Common App personal statement and all the other stuff you have to do, some of these business schools will have additional admission requirements that's going to separate the people who get in from the ones that don't. Okay, what are we looking at here? What's this table?
So we started to touch on some of this previously, but this is something to understand about how these work. So as we talked about with Michigan, Ross, Indiana's Kelley School of Business also falls into this category, and USC Marshall, NYU Stern, and Babson, because their only majors on campus are business. So they technically are a business school in and of themselves. These are schools where you are applying directly into the business school. So you will not be spending 2 years, which is what most other students do that are not in a direct admit program, going through general education credits. You will start in the business school immediately upon arrival. Okay. And you'll start taking classes within your major. It oftentimes will track into things like internship programs, or you'll have additional business-based requirements, summer programming, things that you'll need to be doing, which is why they have you start and admit directly into the school.
Mhm.
The second one is what most schools are. Okay. This is what we consider pre-business. So you might be putting business down as your potential major, but oftentimes you'll be spending 1 to 2 years handling your prerequisites, making sure you get the required GPA, and then you'll be meeting with your mentors on campus to make sure that you're meeting the requirements. You may get to take a couple of business classes prior to that just to confirm that that's the major you ultimately want to be part of. But you're going to spend 2 years kind of in exploratory study before you go for 2 years of intensive in the business program. Okay. The hybrid and the preferred admission. When you're applying to business school, you're applying to the university, but that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get into the business school. And again, even the schools that are considered pre-business secondary admit somewhat have this as well, where they might already say, yes, we'd like to see it, but it's still going to come with a certain set of requirements. You need to hit certain core curriculum, you need to hit a certain GPA, and making sure that we are where we need to be before you're officially given the yes, you're in the business school. If you don't hit that, then you have to be ready to pivot into a different major and consider where else, what other item at the school you'd be interested in studying. Hopefully, in your pre-classes, you'll have an idea of what might be interesting if you aren't going to clear the threshold. But it is something to be aware of. Just because you've necessarily been admitted into like conditional admit or a pre-admit program doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're going to get into the business school ultimately. Okay. And then our finer group is the interdisciplinary and flexible business programs. These are often ones that include majors and classes outside of just directly business. So you might be taking courses in public policy, you might be taking courses in global studies, you might be taking economics, and you wouldn't necessarily be in a direct business school, but they will be taking classes through a variety of different organizations. As we noted, Tufts, Duke, Brown, Carnegie Mellon does this as well. They're heavy on interdisciplinary, WashU and St. Louis. So a lot of those schools where they are very big on interdisciplinary study, they oftentimes will let you do business and something else. And so you'll be tracking through and taking classes across a variety of different schools. If you aren't 100% sure the business is what you want, looking at some of those interdisciplinary programs is a great idea because you'll do business and versus business or. Okay. And you get a little bit more flexibility and the opportunity to explore a little bit more within the studies.
Yeah. And there's pros and cons to each of these, right? And you can look and maybe you can see which ones are most suited towards your goals, or you can apply to a broad range of them, see what comes back, and then make a decision based off of that. But like the direct admit program, right? Number one, the benefit of that is you get immediate access to business courses, right? On day one, basically, right? And the advising and the career resources that come with that. The difficulty of that is more competitive and also fewer chances to transfer in later, or maybe no chance at all to get in later, right? For number two, yeah, benefit of that is you get a little bit of time to explore some other interests before committing, even though you're, um, basically in, presuming that you get the prerequisites and GPA, but it's also not guaranteed, right? The third one, benefit of that is you get the early connection to the business school, but you still have that conditional pathway that you have to satisfy. You still have to meet the GPA or course requirements to secure the spot. And as Katie said for number four, right, the benefit of this is that, yeah, if you're on the fence or you're not 100% certain, or you want to get a, you know, broader understanding of the world besides just a deep dive into business, then this is a great option. But the drawback is you're not going to maybe have as many dedicated resources as some business schools that are just highly focused on that. So, it's a menu, right? You only you know what you want to eat and what you like and what you don't like, but I think it's helpful to, you know, lay it out so you can see that there's all kinds of different ways to go about pursuing a business degree, and even differences in the schools as well as the concentrations. So start looking into this stuff early and figuring out sort of what is most aligned with your goals. Yeah.
And with that, Daniel pointed out, you might not know which one you want, and it would be very much worth it for you to apply to a variety of those different schools. And then oftentimes schools will offer like a business junior day or an admits to the business program day where you can go get a really good feel for what that program actually looks like, because you might be surprised at which one actually fits your learning style and what you're interested in the most. And it's worth having options. We never want you to feel like you don't have a choice in the matter, right? And so if you apply to a variety of those, you're going to have a lot more flexibility in your decision when the time comes.
Yeah. And then there's also the benefit of, going to campus and seeing what it's going to look like for 4 years and asking questions of this current students and the professors. So, of course, ranking, that's the thing that everybody talks about, but there's so much more beyond that that's important. So, like Katie said, going and meeting with a student, figuring out what are the special aspects of each program. Do they offer like a cool study abroad experience? Do they have a co-op or an internship program? Do they have a program where they collaborate with entrepreneurs in the city that's nearby to work on real life projects. All of those things are going to give you a better idea as to what is suited to you than just looking at the rankings and the acceptance rates, right? So do your research. That's huge. Okay, building the business profile. So how do we do it? How are we going to get into these schools? Oh my God, what can we do now in order to make ourselves more competitive? The obvious thing is to, like I said before, take the most difficult courses as possible without taking them to the extreme where your GPA suffers. You have to find the balance between the y-axis of your course rigor and the x-axis of your GPA, right? Where you maintain a high GPA, still demonstrate course rigor, and also take specialized classes, right, in the things that demonstrate quantitative skills. So like AP Calc, AP Stats, AP Economics, or taking courses if there's a dual enrollment option, right? Or if you can go to a competitive summer program, courses that are specialized for business students. This can also help. And then leadership and extracurriculars. Is there a club on campus that you can join, right? Is there an entrepreneurs club? Is there a finance club? Business competitions. There's the Wharton Investment Competition. There's the Conrad Challenge. There's a bunch of different ones. Can you get a team of friends together to put together a business idea, pitch it to real investors, and see what comes back? Can you start your own business, right? Can you think of something that might satisfy a need at your school or in your community where you can actually start making money? Or can you join someone else who is starting an entrepreneurial endeavor and help push that forward for them? What about a job, right? This is much overlooked. When we talk to admissions officers all the time, they like kids that have jobs, even if they're menial or not exactly, you know, uh, you know, high level. It shows that you are willing to put in the time and energy to make money. It teaches you about working with teams, and it also demonstrates responsibility, right? The fact that you can show up at the time of your required shift, and even on the UC app, you can indicate what you spent the money on. So what did you use this money for? And then internships. Internships is a tricky one, right? Of course, if you do an internship, it can definitely look good for your profile, but you don't want to be doing something at mom or dad's office. And the key here is getting involved with real projects that have some kind of tangible or concrete outcome at the end of it. If you're just showing up to an office and sitting there for 8 hours a day, scrolling the internet, right? It's going to be really difficult to convince an admission officer that that was something that's going to prepare you for a business program. So even if you do get to an internship and it seems like not much is going on, be proactive and ask around what kind of projects you can get involved with so you can pull out that information for your essays.
And you guys have the opportunity on campus. One of the most nationally recognized organizations for both clubs and business competitions is DECA. And you guys have that organization on campus already. It's worth looking into it and getting involved because there's already a set of students who are going to those business competitions and doing the work that we are looking for in this. The internship piece of this is well, while the reality of scrolling the internet sometimes all day at your job is really how the real world works from time to time, Daniel's right. We have to be proactive and we want to take the nepotism piece out of it too. Because on college applications, they're going to ask questions about your parents as well. And if they see in your activities you've only ever worked for mom or dad instead of pushing yourself outside of that comfort zone, there's it's not that they're going to necessarily question it, but it's something to consider. We want to make sure that we are looking for outside opportunities and that we're not just going with the easiest path to get things done. Generally speaking, taking the harder route and figuring it out for yourself is going to be one, better essay fodder for sure. And two, is going to be something the colleges are looking for is did you do the real work to get this where you need it to be?
And again, angle these extracurriculars towards whatever your specialization or your brand is going to be. So if you're going to do marketing, can you get an internship with an advertising agency? If it's going to be finance, can you yeah, maybe connect with like a wealth management firm or something like that. So they don't just seem random and all over the place. It's like you have a clear idea. If it's real estate, right? Some of they have real estate specializations. Can you, even shadow a real estate agent or go and work at the company, even in small ways. It's about the real world experience. And so that you don't have a bunch of different things pointing in different directions, but it seems like you've understood what it is that you're interested in. You've explored that in coursework and confirmed that. And then you've gone out into the real world to pursue experiences that also point in that direction. Okay, so what should you do next? What are the next steps? What should they do, Katie? What should these kids be doing?
Well, they should be starting now. It doesn't matter what year of school you're in. As you can see, the things that we have been talking about so far require building up to a final product, right? As with any business, you need the idea, you need to lay a baseline, and then you need to work your way up. And oftentimes, no matter where we start at this, there's some flexibility for exploration as well. Colleges aren't going to assume in your freshman year you know exactly what your entire life path is for the next 10 to 12 years, right? So as a freshman in high school at 14, 15 years old, it's a great time to do the exploratory work. So we're not trying to fit that all in when you're a junior or even in senior year right before applications to try to figure out exactly what it is that you want and to create that narrative. The earlier you start, the better off you're going to be. You'll be organized, you'll feel more confident, and you'll have the ability to work in a broader range of opportunities so that you understand what you're getting yourself into and you'll have more time to explore. However, for those of you that are in the I'm applying now, it's still not too late. We just need to make sure that we are hyper organized and that we are really focused on creating a portfolio and a profile that fits what the colleges are looking for. And the more work we can fit in, the better we're going to be. Next thing on this list is if you're going into a research program, if you're looking for an internship, if you're trying to get into some of these summer programs, the deadlines are coming up for a lot of the summer programming in particular around January and February. So you need to be doing your homework right now. We need to be looking into when these are due, okay? And making an understanding of if I want to do X, Y, and Z, I need to have things prepared 3 to 5 months in advance. On the other side of this, when you're applying to colleges, oftentimes the business program and the regular school, they may not have exactly the same due date for things. And so you need to make sure that you are taking a look at that. So like previously speaking, there's quite a few schools that have an October 15th deadline versus November 1st for early action. Knowing what you're looking at and making sure you have a really good understanding. USC, if you want to get financial aid, you need to have your applications done by December the 1st, I'm pretty sure is again this year. Yeah, Daniel? December 1st. So even if the regular decision deadline isn't until later, if you're hoping to apply into that program and you're looking for financial aid, you need to have it done a month and a half before everybody else turns theirs in. And so there's a whole bunch of different pieces that go into this, and you need to make sure you've done your homework on the programs you're intending to apply to so you don't get caught by surprise or miss any deadlines. We already kind of talked about this one, but build and polish your academic and leadership profile. And honestly, make sure you put together a resume. The number of students who are trying to apply to these programs who don't have a physical resume, that for them is something you're going to need in the professional world. And it looks good to start building that now so that you can continue to add to it as the years go by, right? It's going to be integral to your life. Many of the college applications now will allow you to upload a copy of that resume. So when you're applying and you may only have room for 10 activities, but you've done 15 things, that resume can be a supplement to the application, particularly where you're allowed to upload a professional resume. And the more professional it looks, the better off we'll be. Next up, we can talk about focusing on essays, showing initiative, showing impact. What have you done? Leadership is critical. So even if everything you've done isn't business related, how have you taken on leadership? How have you showed teamwork? That's a really big one. Like we talked earlier, getting a summer job, great thing to think about. It shows a lot of the skills that business programs are actually looking for. I won't say easier because getting a job anywhere these days is a little bit hard, but it's one of the things that you can do that you know what time you're going to be working. You can set a schedule. Most businesses are really flexible, particularly with high school kids. You can work maybe during the school year, but absolutely during the summer, and give yourself a leg up in understanding what jobs are really going to look like. Because your first couple of jobs, you're going to be in, you're going to be out, you're going to be doing that. And honestly, it's great fodder for your essays. Having to deal with customer service, working in retail or food service in high school and getting to understand, how the real world works and interacting with customers, it's a pretty critical life skill, and it shows really well both on your resume and in your ability to deal with people, which is going to be a massive portion of being in the business world after you graduate. Are you going to jump in? Go ahead.
Yeah. I was also going to say, and it will give you specific, concrete things to talk about as opposed to just an abstract, vague interest in business, right? Which is not going to be convincing. So these experiences can give you anecdotes, they can give you interactions, they can give you things that you've observed behind the scenes, things that you didn't know about business that interested you as a result of having done that. So yeah, right. The greatest essays are hyper specific, highly personalized, and the worst essays are super vague and could have been written by anyone or AI. So if you want to have those specific experiences, you need to get out into the world and be connecting with people and being inside a business, basically. And then, yeah, the other thing is that you want to tailor, right, your essays to each school's particular mission and business focus. So some of these schools will ask you, why do you want to study business? You want to come at it for each school based off of what they offer and what they value. So looking into, special aspects of each program and mentioning those and talking about specific professors that maybe you want to connect with, specific opportunities or clubs on campus that you want to join, right? Is there a specific major that you want to go for? And if so, why? What is it that the major offers that no other school can offer? Of course, right? You're going to be applying broadly, but the idea is to make them feel like they're the only school that you're applying to. The other thing we talked about, right? Highlighting business passion and leadership, right? That's kind of speaks for itself. Katie talked about this as well. Attending events that are hosted by the school or networking with alumni. So some schools do track demonstrated interests, meaning that based off of how likely they think that you're going to attend, and if you've made contact with the school through a variety of media, then they're more likely to admit because they feel like if they give you a spot, you'll take it. And their retention rate and yield rate is going to affect their rankings. So if you can connect with someone on campus, if you can meet an alumnus or an alumna, if you can go to events, if you can attend information sessions, all these things are really, really useful.
And
And then,
often,
oh yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
oftentimes when
No.
we're at those events, the alumni are super proud of their institution, and the ones that show up are usually the ones that are the most excited about the school in general and have the most to say. So, creating connections with people who are likely well connected to the school is incredibly important. If you go to one of these events, I mean, oftentimes they'll say, like, hey, we're having an alumni business department. For prospective students, please come in and meet some of our alums. Those are the people we want to talk to because they are the one. Well, first of all, if they're attending an event, they're pretty into it, right? And so the idea here is you meet the people who are excited about the school. It gives you a chance to ask questions and get insight. It also gives you an idea of what do the people who graduate from the school do after they're done, too, right? We talked a little bit earlier about reverse engineering what you eventually want to do. The people who are attending those alumni events, you can see what are their actual job titles. What are they doing as a daytime specific job so that you have an understanding of where the people from that school are going after they've graduated. And like I said, the alumni are always super excited to talk to prospective students. They love to impart their wisdom of their time at their schools, and they are an incredibly important and instrumental part of the process. I highly recommend spending some time talking to alums at schools you're considering.
Yeah. And then you can mention that in interviews, or you can mention that in essays having shown up, right? So the school will know that you're really gung ho about the program. So these are things that can give you an edge. And the final thing is, as always, right? Quality over quantity. Not just with this, but I think in life in general, right? Focus on the strength of your profile. It's better to go deep into the things that you really care about as opposed to spread yourself too thin trying to do a billion different things just to fill out a resume. I think it's especially important for business students because of how much time and energy and investment there is to starting a business or to, generating the material for one of these business competitions. So focus on the things that matter to you as opposed to running around, like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to do a billion different things, and angle them towards whatever it is that you're going to study at university. And of course, right? a college counselor can help you do this, right? Someone like Katie and myself, this is what we do for a living. This is what we love to do, right? We help students figure out who they are, what are the things that matter to them, and build a clear timeline of how to get to where they want to go. And we'll let you know what's worth doing and what isn't. So feel free to scan the QR code in the bottom right of the screen here. That'll take you to an intake form where you can schedule a free 30-minute one-on-one consultation where we can hear about your goals, what you need help with, what you want to know more about, and how we service our students. And
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Katie. And as a reminder, if there are any questions, you can add them to the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. It looks like we already have a couple questions, so I will go ahead and read them off for you now. The first question says, is it important to get high scores on the final AP tests? Or is getting an A in the class just as positively influencing?
well, the best case scenario would be you get an A in the class and you get a high AP score. But, you know, a if you get an A in the class and you don't get a high AP score, you can choose to leave that off of the application. But you can't choose to leave off your grade, right, from the transcript. But it is true that a high AP score could also compensate for a lower grade in the classroom because they know that different schools have different levels of difficulty. Even within the same school, there could be a nightmare teacher versus a really easy teacher. You could also be going through a difficult time in your life. Um, so what's more important? Well, it probably is the A in the class because you have to record that on the application. But the getting that high AP score is just as important because that's the great equalizer across high schools of differing level of competitiveness. What would you say to that, Katie? Would you agree?
I agree entirely. I mean, the A in the AP class, not only does it give you the GPA bump, it really helps with, but you can't avoid it. It'll be a little bit of a concern from the college side of things if you don't include an AP test score for an AP class that you took. But it won't be a disqualifier, but you obviously can't take your class grade off of your transcript. So we're pretty much stuck with that one. So definitely shooting to do really well in the class, get the bonus, get the bump in your GPA in particular, but then aim to 3 or better on the AP exam. Like if you're in that range, like a 2, yeah, we're really not in good shape. But if we go 3 and up, we are probably in the right range for that. And obviously, the higher we go, the better.
Yeah, and if you do well in those, right, you can even earn college credit or get to skip out of certain classes
Not
early
having to
on.
take not having to take a 101 class is a nice bonus to those AP exams. Get to do
Yeah.
something more fun and more interesting usually.
Yeah, so definitely prepare, right? Don't just dismiss the AP exams. They're really important. And you can also qualify for different AP awards, like an AP Scholar Award or AP Scholar with Distinction. And if you're applying to the UK, right, the AP scores are really critical. They don't even care about they care more about that than your GPA even. So,
And as a reminder, you should probably still take your AP exams in senior year, even after you've been admitted, because you are still going to want to have the opportunity to use those classes for college credits and for getting out of some of those baseline level classes so you can dive a little bit more into things that you're interested in at an earlier time.
yeah.
Okay, great. The next question says, what types of internships should they be looking for in high school?
Well, as a sister, this one is, what are you interested in? When we're talking about internships, the idea here, particularly early in your high school career, these can be a little bit more exploratory or even a little bit more broad. You know, you're going into a business and you're shadowing 3 to 5 different people with different roles to understand what they're doing. Then as you get older, when you're in your junior year, maybe we're looking at something like I saw several different portions of this business and I really want to focus on human resources. Usually nobody says that right out of the gates in high school, but it's always worth considering. But then you have a chance to do a bit of a deep dive. Maybe you're doing a longer internship. When we're looking through this, we want it to be specific and we want it to be something that you can write about. something that can come out of this is what are you going to get out of that experience? So if you're just like we said earlier, if you're just kind of sitting around, filing papers or scrolling the internet all day, that's not necessarily a worthwhile internship. It's really worth talking to whoever will oversee said internship beforehand to get an idea of what the duties are going to be for the interns that are there. Some places are super active where their interns are required to do a ton of different things and they really give them a lot of hands-on experience. Some are more like you're a gopher for an upper portion of the company and you might not get to do as much. And so understanding what that will look like would be pretty critical as well.
And I would say also, sometimes don't go just based off of the prestige of the company. I think that's less important, So if you're going to, you know, be someone sitting around not doing very much at what you perceive to be a very prestigious business, or a smaller business that might be smaller in scale and have fewer employees, but you get an experience to really get your hands dirty, then I would take the latter because it gives you more to write about and more real world experience.
Okay, great. The next question says, my son does not have any work experience yet or many leadership roles. Should he put volunteering or shadowing experience on his resume?
As long as it's applicable, sure. But if it doesn't do anything, you're still going to want to have something a little bit stronger to back that up. Shadowing is a good start, but it depends on how much time you're spending doing it. What are the skills that you're working on while you're there? Um, if you're really light on extracurriculars, you need something. But trying to find ways to beef that up a little bit or use the shadowing as a jump off point and then go back and work for the group that you're shadowing or find a way to get more involved versus just having kind of a more generalized, I've spent a little bit of time. So it's like 2 days a week for 1 week of the year. Probably not enough time shadowing to really have a good feel for whatever the person that you're working with is doing anyway. It's about
Yeah. Yeah, I think for volunteering, right, also depends on what it is. If you're just, handing out food or something or picking up trash, maybe would be less impactful than something where you're organizing events or something that could be more business related, or you're, meeting with people or handling complaints or trying to solve logistical problems. So everything should be seen through the eyes of a business major. If it's relevant for that, then it can be helpful. It's not to say that everything that you do has to be pointed towards that, but it's going to give you more material to write about. And so think about the kind of volunteering that you're doing. Are you connecting with people? Are you just, off in your own world doing something that like someone else would do if you weren't there? It depends on what you're doing. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, those are all the questions that we have tonight. So thank you, Katie. Thank you, Daniel, for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, as Katie and Daniel mentioned, please feel free to reach out to us. Either give us a call or email us. And of course, the QR code and all the information is there on the screen. We hope you have a great evening and we will see you again here soon. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.